an anti-vision, a vision for how you don't want your life to end up? Visions can be inspiring, but they're often not powerful enough to break through fear. This week, I'm talking with author and coach Scott Allan about how he uses an anti-vision to push himself out of his comfort zone and face his fears. We also talk about the importance of reminding ourselves that confidence follows action, not the other way around, celebrating small wins, and recognizing when we might be a little too comfortable. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Welcome, Scott. It is such a pleasure to have you here today, and I would love to start by inviting you to introduce yourself.
Sure thing. Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show. Yes, my name is Scott Allan, and I am a full-time author and coach, and also a product creator, and I do a lot of other things as well, but I'll keep it to that for now. I've lived in Japan for about 25, 26 years. Originally, I am from Halifax, Nova Scotia. And how I got here is probably more of a bigger story. I'd love to get into that if you want to, but just a little more on the book front, though. I've been publishing for about 11 or 12 years. I started out probably back in 2012, 2013, self-publishing my books. And since then, I've built up a little library of books that I put out there, mostly just driven by my obsession to help people overcome their obstacles in life and help people to build a greater life. So, yeah, let's see. I'll just leave it at that in case you have a question.
Sure, thank you. So I do want to hear more of your backstory if you're open to sharing it, because I feel like many people who eventually write about and coach people through obstacles generally faced some of their own. So I'd love to hear more about, before you went down this path, what were you doing and what made you decide to shift in this direction?
Yes, great question. So going back a few years, as I mentioned, I am from Canada. When I was living there back in 97, 98, just before I came here, I was working as an electrical engineer. And after going through a transitional period in my life where I felt like I needed to reinvent my life, more or less, I spent the better part of like a few months just putting together my goals and everything. And when I did that, I came to the realization that there were three things I wanted to do. First thing is I wanted to become an author, which eventually happened. Second thing, I wanted to become a better human being, which was, that's probably something we're always working on. And the third thing is I want to travel around the world. So looking at those three things, I thought, well, I could probably do the third thing, travel around the world. Maybe I could do that in the next year. So I decided to put a plan together. And when I made a decision that I was going to leave Canada a year from that date, when I made that decision, then everything just started falling into place. I started getting opportunities to teach overseas. I started meeting people who had traveled around the world. And it was almost as if by making that decision, I was attracting that energy towards me. So what ended up happening actually is when I decided, I'm just going to pack everything up and go to Thailand or Vietnam. A few months later, I did end up finding a job in Japan before I came here. And it was just by random. I was looking through the newspaper one day. There was an advertisement in there for a position and just teach English in Japan. And I got hired. Company brought me over. They set us up. And so I went from being an engineer to suddenly I was teaching business English in these Japanese companies, and I couldn't speak any Japanese. Unfortunately, I didn't have to. I just was going to classrooms and hanging out with people and getting paid really good money to do this thing. Did I have imposter syndrome? Yes, because I don't have a background in teaching or education, but that was just that was okay because I just learned like it was just day by day, I was just learning something new every day. And that's the thing too, is when it comes to, if you're not feeling confident in something, you're feeling imposter syndrome. I found that it's just learning something day by day, which I think James Clear probably has something like that in his book where he refers to it as like getting better with like just at, that 1% where you're getting better at something just a little bit every day. It was just an accumulation of that with everything I've been working on, I think, but yeah, in the beginning, that was a little bit intimidating when, I had to go and, teach, business people how to, conduct themselves in other cultures and things like that. And I had no training on this. The company gave us a little bit of it, but a lot of it really just came down to being willing to learn, I think. So,
Mm. And I think so many people have found themselves in that situation where they start to doubt, who am I to do this, right? They start to question, um, do I have what it takes to effectively ... right? Whatever that
mm-hmm,
is. And what I've learned, I think, probably through my entrepreneurial ventures is you don't have to be an expert to be of service to others. You just need to know a little bit more than they do. And I
mm-hmm,
think that's
mm-hmm,
what, when you're talking about teaching English to people, you know English. There's no doubt about that. And so they're probably so grateful and appreciative of your support. They're not challenging every little thing that you're doing or scrutinizing your
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
background. And uh,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You just have to be a couple steps ahead of everybody else. What was interesting though, when I was teaching is like, I was never, you know, the greatest student when I was in school. I wasn't, that good at grammar. I mean, I shouldn't say I'm not good. I didn't know the grammar rules. So like some people who went through the formal training, they could tell you all about the grammar rules and this and that. I get asked grammar rules all the time. And I was just like, well, I'll get back to you on that one. And I have to go look it up. So I was like, if someone asked me something that I didn't know, which happened all the time, I was just like, I'll get back to you on that and let you know. And I would have to go and ask somebody, what was that grammar rule about such and such? So, and it was just interesting because eventually I got a job where I was managing other English teachers and they all had like degrees and masters. And, I didn't have any of those things. And I was like, yeah, it was a little bit intimidating at first, but then I realized like, well, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I just have to know what I need to know to get the job done. Right. So,
that's right. That's right.
mm-hmm.
And that is a difficult mindset to adopt because we are naturally oriented towards what we don't know. We are so
Mm-hmm.
aware of all
Mm-hmm.
things we don't know. But I think this applies to people in any context that if you have people in your team that you deem as quote unquote like smarter or more qualified than you, you could let that intimidate you or let that undermine your confidence, or you can be grateful that they have that expertise so that
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to, right? And your job is not to know their job. Your job is to lead them.
Yeah. That's a great point. And what something that used to really bother me, like if I was in a room with somebody who, yeah, had more education than I did, or I felt was smarter than me, like I would be intimidated by that. So when I actually talked to this person, it would show in just the way I communicated with them. Like I would be a little bit standoffish, or I just wanted to keep our conversation short. I didn't want to be in the same room with them. And I realized like it wasn't the situation. It wasn't the fact that they were smarter than me and they had more education. It was how I was viewing the whole situation, right? So I I did a complete flip around with that. I'd actually tell them, I'm really glad you're in this meeting with me because you know a lot more about this than I do, and you're smarter than I am. And even if didn't matter if they were or they weren't, like I would just say it anyway because I just want to know that I was just being real. And it's like I want them to know that I actually needed them on my team because they could do things that I couldn't do, even though maybe I was running the team. And I felt like just putting that out there made everyone feel more comfortable, because first of all, after that, I didn't really care what they thought of me. So, and that just removed I don't know if it was like imposter syndrome at the time or is it like intimidation, just removed that completely. And I just let people know too. I mean, I've walked into board meetings before where again, not the smartest person in the room, but when you feel like you have to be right away, you feel like an imposter right away because you feel like you're putting on an air that, I have to be the smartest person in the room because I'm the CEO or I'm the leader of the team. And you just come across as, and you actually feel fake and you feel phony. And I just let everybody know like, look, I'm not the smartest person here, but that's why you're all here, is to help us, help me figure this out so we can get this project done. And I just found that when I took that approach to it, changed my mindset around it, yeah, things just flowed a lot better for myself and the people that I was trying to help, whether I was leading a team or whether I was part of a team. So,
I love that. I think that that's kind of naming the elephant in the room, right? Because there's no doubt if somebody's an expert in a particular area and we don't have that expertise, yeah, they are smarter in that particular domain than we are. But it doesn't mean that we don't have other skills that qualify us for the role that we've been given, right? And so to just name it for yourself, name it for the other person, unapologetically, without defensiveness, of like, you're the expert at this. And I'm going to lean on you for that, and just sort of establishes the terms, right?
mm, yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think when I just going back into book publishing. So when I started writing, actually, like years, I started writing my content, probably after I had come to Japan. I was here for about a decade, and then I started getting a little bit, I don't know, itchy again. And what I mean by that is, like, I was like, maybe there's something else I should be doing, oh yeah, what about those books I was going to write? And that's when I kind of realized, like, I've been teaching for a decade. I'd gotten pretty good at it, and I thought, well, this isn't going to last forever, but I should be thinking about my next thing, unless I want to be teaching for the rest of my life, which I didn't think I did. So yeah, my passion really was in books and writing and publishing, although I hadn't published anything at the time. But I didn't know anybody who was writing books, and I just picked up a few books on how to write books, and I basically I just dove right into it. But here's the thing. There's a difference between writing by yourself in a coffee shop and publishing something, because what I realized is, like, yes, it took me a few years to write my first book or two, but inside, I never really believed that I was going to actually publish it, even though I was telling people I was going to, because I thought, well, as long as I just keep these words private, nobody has to see them. And then there's no one's going to criticize you for writing a bad book and all this. So that imposter syndrome was always there. I just kind of, pushed it aside until it got to the point where I realized, well, I've, edited this book now 6 times. It's probably ready to publish. And around this time, Amazon had launched their self-publishing platform. And I was looking for a publisher and had a couple of, they weren't offers, but they were kind of like bites, right? But when I had the opportunity to self-publish it, I just went that route, put my books out there, and nothing happened. I didn't really sell any books, but I didn't tell anybody I published books either. So I was still kind of playing like, okay, as long as I don't tell people about it, maybe they won't buy it, and so it was just like, I just wanted my book to be out there with my name on it. And I thought, that was good enough. But turns out some people did buy it. And then I got a couple of, I don't know, responses from that. People said, I really like this book. Some people didn't like it, and sometimes that's can be something it's hard to take too, when you put your a lot of effort into something and someone says, I didn't really like it. But what I realized is, like, wow, that's great that you didn't like it. Why didn't you like it? I would actually ask for constructive feedback on that and then just go make it better. And I realized, oh, like, actually I was talking to a mentor of mine at the time, and he said, yeah, but that's how products are made. He goes, because he worked in a company where they put out products all the time. They were never perfect. He goes, they would put it out, they would get constructive feedback or claims or whatever, and they just refine it and make it better and better. So I just took the same approach to publishing as well.
I love that. I think that, that's what beta testing is all about in the software world and beyond. The idea that you can have a base product, but you really shape it based on what other people are telling you, right? And it all comes down to what's your overarching goal here? I think about this a lot. Is your goal to be perfect? Is your goal to be, whatever it, or is it to be of greatest service? And if you're writing for an audience, if you have a message that you think is going to help them, then it's not about being perfect, right? It's about serving. And I think that just sort of shifts the mindset in a way that allows us to be more open to that feedback and to not be so concerned about, do I have the right qualifications or credentials? Like, as long as you can be of service to the people that you want to help, that's what matters most.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. My best-selling book, which is Do the Hard Things First, and was translated into like 16 languages, was not the book that was written. It's not my best book, actually. That was, like I just know that for sure. So I actually got a lot of feedback from that, like good and not so good. And in fact, there are these two guys who did a 1 hour podcast interview, not with me, just these two guys just go out there and they do they do reviews on books, right? And they did this book probably about when it first came out, like the first 3 or 4 months. And it was getting some good traction in the Amazon space and stuff like that. But these guys took this book and they just trashed it for an hour. Like, and I didn't find the review until like 6 months ago. And since then, the book's already had like a second or third edition, so it's a lot better than it when it first came out. But it was interesting to actually go through like. And it looked like they had a lot of reviews and downloads from this. So I was like, wow, this was like a couple years ago. And but my point to this is that if I'd seen this a couple years ago, and when I first put the book in there, how would I have reacted? I might have taken the book down and just like republished it later or not republished it. I don't know. But, I've had a couple of books like that where they're just like didn't do very well. Maybe I didn't put enough into the editing, but um, what I did is I went through their interview twice, and it wasn't like an interview. It's just like, them basically reviewing the book. And I took all the notes that they mentioned, like he would, this book could have been much better if he did this, 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 and this. And I took that information and I revised the book again and then just republished it again. And so I just learned something from that too, is like, hey, it's all right to, not everyone's going to love everything you do, whether if you're speaking on stage, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. If you tried to get me onto a podcast interview a year ago, I probably would have been very difficult because my imposter syndrome at the time was like, for public writing and publishing was pretty easy to do that, but public speaking was a different thing. It's just like I just wouldn't step onto a stage, and I did interviews in the past, but it was like, I was always like kind of like on the edge because what if I say the wrong thing? What if people don't like what I say? What if they ask me a question I don't know? And like all these things would just come up all the time, and then I remember like, it doesn't really matter. Like what matters is you just get out there and do the thing and then see how it works out. I mean, that's just, I don't know, like I don't have a solution for overcoming syndrome, but for the one thing that I can say is like, it's just taking it one step at a time and getting some small wins, by the way. Like, if you can get one or two little small wins, you don't have to start with something big. Because I get this question a lot through like do the hard things first is it's actually about doing the hard things. But if you're really struggling with procrastination and doing nothing, and starting with something really small is really what you want to start with. Like get those small wins and just build up to it. So just take the public speaking as an example. You don't have to get out on stage in front of 1,000 people. uh, get in front of 10 people or 5 people, or, put your pets on a couch and whatever it takes, right? Just do something, because like I used to, like, I would actually just stand in front of the mirror and practice speaking to myself before I would, go on stage, for example, or, go into an interview. So like whatever it takes, because that imposter syndrome, like it's not like you get confident and then you do it. You actually, and that's the thing that like, I think the most important thing to take away, probably like for me anyway, I realized like once I get more confident, then I'll go and do this thing. And I realized like I never really had the confidence because I wasn't doing it anyway. So when I just dove in and started doing it, I built the confidence along the way, and it just comes back to that 1% rule, just, getting a little bit better at it every time you do it. So, and that goes for whether you're writing a book, creating artwork, or, doing public speaking, that's all the same. And that imposter syndrome, by the way, is actually a good thing because that's a sign that you're doing something that you're not used to doing, which means you're doing something scared, which is actually good for you. So,
Mm. Yeah, and I love this because this is very aligned with how I think about it too. Just what you said of confidence follows action. It's not the other way around. We can't read our way into confidence. We can't study our way into confidence. And those of us who are perfectionists or high achievers that are used to relying on external resources in order to prepare for
mm,
something
mm,
want the definitive textbook on how to build our confidence. And the simplest thing is what you just said, is to do the scary thing at a reasonable scale. So it's not diving headfirst into the deep end, but it's doing the thing you're afraid of, and then your brain catches up and your brain
Hmm.
realizes,
Hmm.
oh, I lived to tell about that, right? The sky didn't fall, the world didn't collapse, and then you can take that next step forward. And eventually you build those muscles, you get stronger, and if you choose to, you're going to keep moving forward and get more confident over time.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. So what I found is that like when I start to get comfortable with what I'm doing, um, that's when I feel really confident. Like, oh, I've done this, maybe I'm publishing my 40th book. I'm like, oh, I've done this before, no big deal. But that's actually like, okay, that's fine. But I actually want the imposter syndrome. I want to feel like I don't have a lot of confidence in doing this thing because that means I'm moving in the right direction. So recently I've been taking on some other challenges where I feel that, I don't have confidence in doing this thing. And I realize, well, it's probably because you haven't done much of it. Like that would be, it seems like a very obvious, self-realization, but it's true, so it's like, if you like actually getting on doing TikTok videos, for example, it's like, no way am I getting on TikTok and doing these live videos. And then I did a few of them. I was like, well, these weren't too bad. And I had a few people sign up for so maybe I'll do more of them, and so it's like, oh, so exposure therapy, the more of it you do, the better at it you get, the more confidence you get. And then, eventually you'll have the next challenge, so like there's a big difference between standing in a room with, maybe in front of 10 people doing a presentation, and now you're on stage in front of 200 people. Maybe you're doing the same presentation, but when you step onto a bigger stage, you're going to feel like, wow, I'm really scared,
Mhm.
and then you might go from 200 to 2000 to who knows 20,000, just using that as an example, but you can probably apply that to a lot of other things. So
Absolutely. And I like what you're saying too. I find myself checking in with myself from time to time and saying, am I a little bit too comfortable right now? Right? When was the last time I felt uncomfortable? And maybe that's a signal that it's time to stretch and do something new. Because yeah, when you're in your comfort zone, you feel great. You feel confident,
mhm.
but that's not where we're
Mm.
growing. That's usually not in alignment with what we want for our lives over time.
Mhm.
We most of us would say we want to keep challenging ourselves. We want to keep learning. And if we're feeling too comfortable, then that's not happening, right? So looking
Mhm.
for those
Mhm.
opportunities. I'm a big believer in one of the things I do is if it's something I really want to do, it's something that I maybe don't know how to do yet, or I'm not quite sure, haven't figured it out yet, but I know I want to do it. I'll say yes before my inner critic has a chance to tell me that
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
can't do it. And then once I've made that commitment, I know I'll figure out how to do it. I will follow through because it's a commitment that I've made. So it's always about looking outside of those boundaries of your comfort zone for what's next.
Yeah. I like that though, like saying yes before you really like, and I have a tendency to say yes to pretty much everything anyway, which sometimes was good, sometimes it wasn't. But I figured like, let's just say somebody, yeah, asked me to, do a presentation in front of, 10,000 people. And if I think about it too long, I'll be like, I'll try to find all the reasons why I shouldn't do it, because yeah, I'm afraid and I don't want to stand in front of a bunch of people and, look like a fool basically. Right. So, but if I say yes, now I'm committed. Now I'm going to be feeling the fear and doing it anyway. One of my favorite books by Susan Jeffers. Just love that book.
Yes.
But that's really what it's about. Is like, every time I said yes to something and I felt really scared about doing it, I did it anyway. When it was over, I looked back and I go like, wow, that was really, that was hard. I did a lot of prep for it. It wasn't perfect, but I got through it. And now I feel like I can take on, the next challenge, or if I did the same thing again, I'd be able to do it better the next time. And that's just how you're right. Like that's where we grow is like when we're outside of that comfort zone. So,
Yeah, and rarely do we look back and say, oh, I never should have said yes to that opportunity. Right?
mhm,
It's
mhm,
far more likely that we're going to look back and say, there's so many things that I didn't do because of fear, and that's what we're going
mm,
to regret.
yeah. No, that's a great point. Yeah, because I think I always think of it this way, like, you know, when you get to the end of your days and you look back and you're like, well, I'm I might have a couple of regrets, but I mean, Honestly, like the only things that I'm really going to regret are the things that I didn't do. And I think, and those things that you know, like I realize, oh, those things I had that opportunity to say yes to, and I said no because I was scared. And knowing that, I'm almost ready to say yes to just about not everything, but like most things. But to your point, though, is like, yeah, if I overthink it too much, or if someone says, take some time to think about it if you really want to do this, I'll probably come back with a no because that part of me that's really scared will just be, fall back into the comfort zone again, which don't get me wrong, it's a good place to be sometimes,
Mhm.
but we really want to grow both professionally and personally. We've got to be ready to just push beyond that. And sometimes we need we need other people to push us too. Like I need other people to be saying, you can't say no to this thing because if you do this thing, you're going to get to that next level. And it's for me, I have to visualize what that next level could actually look like. And I have an anti-vision of this as well. So, we talk about people having a vision for the dream life they want. And I think that's all good. I have that. I have a vision board and stuff like that. But I also have the anti-vision, which comes back to getting to the end of your days, looking back and regretting everything that you didn't do. My anti-vision is actually that. It's like, it's the worst version of myself, which is like the version of myself that ran away from everything and didn't try anything and was basically, too scared to do the things that I really wanted to do. So the anti-vision for me was always more powerful than the actual vision of like the positive vision of like, rainbows and flowers and success and all this, right? So,
I love that. I was actually thinking about something similar this morning because our brains are so hardwired to avoid loss
mm,
that we will often find what feels like a rational excuse to
mm,
not do something. So, like you said, when you have a lot of time to think about it, you'll come up with all these reasons why it doesn't make sense to do it. And that's satisfying in the moment. But then you get to the end of your life and you realize, I played it too safe, right? I
mm,
was too focused on protecting myself. And so, what I love about what you're saying about the anti vision is it sort of flips the loss avoidance on its head. And instead of prioritizing loss avoidance in the short term, it's looking longer term at what do I want to avoid losing when I get to the end of my life, right? So you give yourself a long game to
mm,
play that ensures that, I mean, we're not always going to do it perfectly, right? There are going to be times in our lives when we're super stressed or things just feel too scary to do. But for the most part, if you have this kind of guiding vision of, I want to make sure that I don't end up in this place, then your brain is sort of calculating the risks against that anti-vision as opposed to
mhm,
what is the
mhm.
safest thing in this one moment in time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We start calculating the losses. Like, can I afford to lose that money? Can I afford to lose, face in front of everybody? And you start to look at it that way. And then everything just becomes like a minus, minus, minus. And you realize, like, yeah, I don't want to lose anything. So I'm just going to not do anything, Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you don't realize it usually until it's too late.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you might only have that one opportunity to do that one thing. I mean, you never know. I think when it comes to luck, like luck is one of those things where, sure, I mean, maybe we all get lucky at some point in our lives, but you can get really lucky if you set yourself up for it. So, in other words, like, okay, just take if I write a book and then I put it out there and then it gets discovered by somebody like a big publisher and they pick it up and I end up, who knows, like it just becomes a lot more successful. Well, that's great. That's good for a story. But the reason that it got picked up in the first place is because I put the book out in the first place. I actually set myself up for it. Now, again, you can take that example and use it for anything else. I know a friend of mine years ago, he decided to enter a bodybuilding contest just based on, I think it was he didn't actually want to do it. He just did it because it was a bet he had with somebody else. And he ended up going out there and winning the contest, So like, so, I mean, he just created his own luck. Right. But I mean, you can create your own luck for anything, but you do have to, prepare for it. I mean, if, let's just say if that publishing contract had come around my way, I would not have seen it because I wouldn't have had a book ready if I hadn't written it in the first place. So it always has to start with one action, like what is it that you're working on right now that is building momentum towards, could be your big dream, it could be a goal you have, and also identifying what is the fear that's actually holding you back from moving forward. Because here's the thing, like I work with a lot of authors who are writing books, and probably the one topic that does come up a lot is the imposter syndrome, because sometimes they're afraid to actually do any of the writing at all, or I've seen people actually get to the point where they've written the book and they wouldn't publish it, So it's like, okay, well, just consider, like, you've gotten this far. What's going to happen, if you don't publish it, or better yet, what could happen if you do publish it? So we try to go through all these, like, the different scenarios and get them to see the different versions, like the anti-vision if you don't do this, and like what could happen if you do actually do this. We just don't know what's going to happen when you put something out there, or put yourself out there. So
yes, and I think your point about luck is really interesting, because sure, there is luck in the world, but oftentimes it feels like luck when in actuality, it's the intersection of opportunity and your preparation, right?
For
Because,
sure.
like if you hadn't been working on that book, you might not have even been paying attention to this, what felt like a lucky break, but, only was on your radar because of all the steps you had taken to get that point in the first place. And so I think that, one of the hallmarks of imposter syndrome is that we chalk up our successes to luck. It's like, oh, I was in the right place at the right time, or that was a lucky. No, it's a consequence of the intentional behaviors that you've been engaging in so that you were able to spot the opportunity when it came up.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah. I was just thinking, another thing with imposter syndrome too is that we tend to downplay our abilities a lot. So one of the things that was really hard for me to take, and it still is actually, is take, like, compliments, right? If people say, "Oh, you did a great job on that," whatever, maybe I was like, "Oh, anybody could have done that," or like I always would downplay it and just kind of brush it off. And I could tell, like, sometimes some of the other person was like, "Well, I just gave him a compliment and he just brushed me off." It's like I started noticing this pattern though, again and again. Like every time somebody would say something like that, this little voice inside me go, don't accept that compliment. Like there's going to be responsibility with it. They're going to want more from you, and and then, like, all these voices would start popping up. And again, like, yeah, part of it was like imposter syndrome, like, not believing that I was actually good enough to receive such an award or receive such a compliment. And that's really something that was really hard to work through. It still is, because now when someone gives me a compliment, I actually just have to keep my mouth closed and not say anything. I was like, "Thank you." And that's, I've literally had to train myself just to say that, because if I say anything more, it's going to be like, "Oh, no, that was just, I was just in the right place at the right time." And that was it. So, yeah.
Exactly. I always try to remind people, thank you is a complete sentence, right? You don't have to keep going after that. Yeah. This has been so great, Scott. I love what you're sharing. It's so aligned with how I think about imposter syndrome. And I want to make sure that anybody listening who wants to find your books, who wants to connect with you, has an opportunity to do that. Where can they find you if they want more of your work?
Yes, I have a couple of sites. One is scottallanbooks.com. We sell everything direct on there right now, and we'll have courses on there as well. And scottallanpublishing.com too. And of course, they can go to Amazon and they can probably find the books there as well.
Excellent. We'll make sure those links are in the show notes as well. And thank you again, Scott, for the great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's been fantastic. It's one of my favorite topics. So thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.